The cantina was dark and smoky. Strange music played from hidden speakers. Aliens of many different kinds sat at small tables, drinking colorful drinks and talking in low voices. The air smelled like oil and something sweet that burned the nose. In the back corner, away from the crowd, sat an alien that looked like he had seen too many battles. His name was Krelthak. His skin was hard like armor, colored green and brown like old metal. 3 eyes sat on his wide head, and each eye had seen things that most beings could not imagine. Scars covered his arms and face. Some were old and white. Others were newer, still red and angry. Across from him sat a much younger alien. She had blue skin and large, curious eyes. Her name was Vex Mira, and she worked for the Galactic News Network. She held a small recording device in her hands, but she had not turned it on yet. "Are you sure you want to hear this story?" Krelthak asked. His voice was rough, like rocks grinding together. "Most people do not want to know the truth about humans." Vex Mira leaned forward. "Everyone in the galaxy talks about the Terran Coalition war. They say humans are the greatest warriors ever. But no one explains why. I need to know the real reason." Krelthak picked up his drink. It was thick and green, and it glowed softly in the dark room. He took a long sip and stared at nothing for a moment. "The real reason," he said slowly. "Yes, there is a real reason, but it is not what your readers will want to hear." "Tell me anyway," Vex Mira said. The old veteran was quiet for a long time. The music in the cantina changed to something sadder. Other aliens laughed and talked, but their table felt separate from all of that. It felt heavy with old memories. "I fought in that war for 3 years, Krelthak finally said. "I was part of the coalition forces. We thought we were strong. We had the best weapons, the best ships, the best training. We had more soldiers than the humans, much more." He paused and touched one of the scars on his arm. "The first time I saw a human soldier, I thought it was a joke. They are so small compared to most of us. Their skin is soft. They have only 2 eyes. They cannot see in the dark like we can. They are not as fast as the Zentari. They are not as strong as the Chromax. They do not heal as quickly as the Velans." Vex Mira was writing notes on a small pad. "So what made them dangerous?" "That is what I asked myself every day for 3 years, Krelthak said. "At first I thought it was their technology. Their weapons were good, but not better than ours. Their ships were fast, but we had faster ones. Their armor was strong, but it could be broken." He finished his drink and signaled for another one. The server, a tall alien with 4 arms, brought him a new glass without saying anything. "Then I thought maybe it was their numbers, but there were not that many humans compared to all the coalition species together. They were always outnumbered in every battle I saw." "So what was it?" Vex Mira asked. Krelthak's 3 eyes focused on her. "In the dim light, they seemed to glow with their own light. It was something much worse than weapons or numbers," he said. "It was something that still keeps me awake at night." The veteran took another drink and continued his story. "My first real battle with humans was at Kepler Station. It was a mining station in space, very important for fuel production. The coalition needed to capture it. Intelligence said there were only 50 humans defending it. We sent 500 soldiers to take it." Vex Mira looked up from her notes. "That should have been easy." "That is what we thought," Krelthak said. "I was excited. It would be my first victory against the famous human warriors. I would have good stories to tell." He was quiet again, remembering. "The attack started well. We surrounded the station. We cut off their communications. We blocked all the escape routes. The humans could not call for help and they could not run away. We gave them a chance to surrender. Did they take it?" "No." Krelthak's voice got quieter. "They did not even answer us. So we began the attack." The music in the cantina stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the air system and quiet conversations from other tables. "The first wave of our soldiers went in through the main docking bay. Standard procedure, fast and hard. We expected the humans to fall back and try to defend the center of the station." Vex Mira waited for him to continue. "But they did not fall back. They did something I had never seen before in any military training. They let our soldiers come inside. Then they sealed the doors behind them. They trapped our own soldiers inside with them." "That sounds like suicide," Vex Mira said. "That is what I thought too. But it was not suicide. It was strategy." Krelthak's scarred hands moved as he talked, like he was still fighting that old battle. "The humans knew they could not win a normal fight, so they did not fight a normal fight. They turned the station into a trap. Every hallway, every room, every corner became a weapon. They used the station's own systems against us. What do you mean? They turned off the gravity in some sections so our soldiers floated helplessly. They turned up the heat in other sections until our armor became too hot to wear. They released gas that made it hard to see. They played loud sounds that hurt our ears. Vexamira was writing quickly now, but the worst part was not the traps. The worst part was the humans themselves. They fought like they had nothing to lose. Like they were already dead and just had not fallen down yet. Krelthak stared into his drink. I saw one human soldier continue fighting with a broken arm. Another one kept shooting even after he was badly wounded. They did not retreat. They did not ask for mercy. They just kept fighting until they could not fight anymore. How did the battle end? After 6 hours, we finally took the station. But we lost almost half our soldiers doing it. 50 humans had stopped 250 coalition troops, and when we searched the station afterward, we found something that confused us. What was that? The humans had enough supplies to last for months. They had escape pods that could have taken them to safety. They could have run away any time they wanted, but they chose to stay and fight. Vexmira looked up from her notes. Why would they do that? Krelthak met her eyes with all three of his own. That, he said, is what I spent the next 3 years trying to understand, and when I finally learned the answer, I wished I had never asked the question. He pushed his empty glass away and leaned back in his chair. Do you still want to hear the rest of this story? Vexamira nodded without hesitation. Then you should know that after tonight you will never think about humans the same way again. Krelthak ordered another drink. This one was stronger and it burned his throat as he swallowed. The cantina had gotten busier. More aliens had come in, talking loudly about trade deals and ship repairs. But the corner where he sat with Vexmira felt quiet and separate. After Kepler Station, my commanders decided I should learn more about human tactics, Krelthak said. They assigned me to work with a human unit. Joint operations, they called it. I was supposed to study them and report back. Vexmira's recording device sat on the table between them, its small red light blinking steadily. What was that like? She asked. Terrifying, Krelthak said without hesitation, but not in the way you might think. He rubbed one of his scars, a long white line that ran from his shoulder to his elbow. The first human I met was their captain. His name was Lee Hyun. He was not very tall even for a human. He had dark hair and quiet eyes. When he spoke, his voice was soft and calm. If you met him in a place like this, you would think he was just a normal person, maybe a trader or a teacher. But he was not. No. Captain Lee Hyun was one of the most dangerous beings I have ever encountered, but it took me weeks to understand why. Krelthak paused as a group of loud aliens walked past their table. He waited until they were gone before continuing. The first thing that confused me was how Lee Hyun talked to his soldiers. In coalition forces, officers give orders and soldiers follow them. It is simple and clear. But Lee Hyun was different. He asked questions. He listened to suggestions. He treated his soldiers like they were thinking beings, not just tools for fighting. That sounds reasonable, Vexmira said. It was reasonable. That was the problem. Everything about him seemed reasonable and normal, until the fighting started. Krelthak took another drink. His 3 eyes seemed to focus on something far away. Lee Hyun's second in command was Sergeant Kim Jae. She was small, even for a human woman. She had short black hair and hands that never shook, no matter what was happening around her. I watched her perform surgery on wounded soldiers while enemy shells were exploding nearby. She never stopped, never rushed, never made a mistake. She was a medic? She was everything, Krelthak said. Medic, engineer, tactical advisor, weapons expert. Human soldiers do not specialize the way we do. They learn many different skills. It makes them harder to predict and harder to stop. Vexmira made notes on her pad. Then there was Private Park Soman. She was the youngest human I met, maybe 19 or 20 years old. She had just finished her training, but there was something about her that made even veteran coalition soldiers nervous. What was that? She was too calm, Krelthak said. When mortars were falling and people were dying, she would sit there cleaning her weapon or eating her food like nothing was happening. It was not natural. It was like she had turned off the part of her brain that feels fear. The veteran's voice got quieter. I spent 3 months with that unit. 3 months watching them fight, watching them live, watching them die, and every day I understood them less. Tell me about a specific battle, Vexmira said. Krelthak nodded slowly. Arcturus 7, It was a mining colony on the edge of Coalition space, important because of the rare metals they dug from the ground. The humans had taken it, and we were ordered to take it back. He gestured with his hands, drawing an invisible map on the table. The colony was built into the side of a mountain, only one way in or out, perfect for defense. The humans had maybe 200 soldiers inside. We brought 3,000. That should have been easy. Nothing with humans is ever easy, Kreltak said. We surrounded the colony and began a siege. Cut off their supplies, blocked their communications, stopped all ships from landing. Standard procedure. We expected them to surrender in a few days when they ran out of food and ammunition. Vexmira waited. But they did not run out. Somehow they kept fighting, week after week, month after month. We could not understand how they were surviving. What were they doing? Everything, Kreltak said. Captain Lee Hyun had his soldiers growing food in the mining tunnels. Sergeant Kim Jae was making ammunition from mining equipment. Private Park Soman was training civilian miners to fight like soldiers. The veteran shook his head. But that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was how they acted during the siege. Most soldiers under that kind of pressure would become angry or scared or desperate. But the humans seemed to get more focused. More dangerous, how so? They started coming out at night. Small groups, maybe 5 or 6 soldiers. They would attack our camps, destroy our equipment, kill our guards, then disappear back into the mountain. We could never catch them. Krelthak's scarred hands clenched into fists. I was part of a patrol that ran into one of these night groups. 6 humans against 20 coalition soldiers. We should have destroyed them easily. But you did not? No, they fought like demons. Private Park Soman killed 3 of my squad mates before we even knew she was there. Sergeant Kim Jae used explosives made from mining chemicals. Captain Lee Hyun, he moved like a ghost. He was there, then he was not, then he was behind you with a knife. Vexamira stopped writing and looked up. How did you survive? Luck, Krelthak said. And the fact that they were not trying to kill all of us. They wanted prisoners. They took 4 of my squad mates alive and disappeared into the mountain. Why did they want prisoners? Information. But also something else. Something that took me a long time to understand. Krelthak finished his drink and signaled for another. The siege lasted 4 months. 4 months of constant fighting, constant pressure, constant death. By the end, we had lost almost 1,000 soldiers. The humans had lost maybe 50. How did it end? It ended when I finally understood what the humans were really doing, Krelthak said. They were not just defending the colony. They were studying us. Learning how we fought, how we thought, how we made decisions. Studying you. Every prisoner they took, they questioned. Not torture, not threats. They just talked to them. Asked about their families, their homes, their reasons for fighting. Captain Lee Hyun spoke to me personally when they captured me during the final assault. Vexmira's eyes widened. They captured you. For 3 days, Krelthak said. And in those 3 days, I learned more about human warfare than in all my previous battles combined. What did you learn? Krelthak's 3 eyes met hers across the table. I learned that humans do not fight battles. They fight wars. Every engagement, every skirmish, every death is part of a larger plan. They were not trying to hold Arcturus 7 forever. They were buying time while their fleets repositioned across the galaxy. And it worked. It worked perfectly. When they finally abandoned the colony, they had delayed our advance by 6 months. 6 months that allowed human forces to capture 3 coalition strongholds and cut off our supply lines. Vexamira was quiet for a moment, thinking. But why did they let you live? Why did they release you? Krelthak smiled, but it was not a happy expression. Because Captain Lee Hyun wanted me to tell this story. He wanted coalition forces to know what they were really fighting against. He said fear was just another weapon and the truth was more frightening than any lie. The veteran leaned back in his chair. He was right. The cantina had grown darker as the night went on. Many of the other aliens had left, going back to their ships or hotels. Only a few tables still had customers, and they spoke in whispers. Kreltak and Vexmira sat in their corner like 2 shadows sharing old secrets. There is something else I need to tell you, Kreltak said. His voice was rougher now, like the words were hard to speak. Something that happened on Crimson Mesa. It was the worst thing I saw in the entire war. Vexamira leaned forward. Her recording device was still running, its red light blinking in the dim room. Crimson Mesa was a fortress world, Krelthak continued. The Coalition had built huge defense systems there. Massive walls, energy shields, automated weapons. It was supposed to be impossible to capture. He paused and touched another scar, this one running across his neck. The humans attacked it anyway. But they did not attack the way any normal military would attack. They did something that no other species would ever think of doing. What was that? Krelthak was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. They used their own soldiers as weapons. Vexamira looked confused. I do not understand. Neither did I at first, Krelthak said. Let me tell you about Corporal Choi Min. He was part of Captain Lee Hyun's unit. A good soldier, smart and brave. He had a wife and 2 children back on Earth. He showed me pictures of them. The veteran picked up his drink but did not take a sip. During the assault on Crimson Mesa, our forces were pinned down behind the main defense wall. The automated weapons were cutting down anyone who tried to advance. We could not move forward and the humans could not break through our defenses. So what happened? Choi Min volunteered for what the humans called a sacrifice play. I did not know what that meant at the time. Krelthak finally took a drink, as if he needed the courage to continue. He put on extra armor and explosives. Then he ran directly at the automated weapons. He knew they would kill him. Everyone knew they would kill him. That was the point. Vexmira's writing hand had stopped moving. The weapons focused on him because he was the biggest threat. While they were shooting at him, the rest of his squad moved forward. By the time the weapons killed him, his squad was close enough to destroy them. That is horrible, Vexmira whispered. That was just the beginning, Krelthak said. What happened next was worse. He stared at the table between them. Other human soldiers started volunteering for sacrifice plays. Not because their officers ordered them to. Because they wanted to. They lined up to die for their mission. Why would they do that? I asked Sergeant Kim Jae that same question. She looked at me like I was stupid. She said, 1 life for 10 lives saved is good math. 1 life for 100 lives saved is great math. Krelthak shook his head. But it was not just about numbers. There was something else. Something that made it even more frightening. What? The humans who volunteered to die. They were happy about it. Not sad, not afraid, happy. Like they had found the perfect way to help their friends. Vexmira put down her writing pad. I met a human soldier named Private Yoon Da-hee during that battle. She was young, maybe 22 years old. She had bright eyes and she smiled a lot. She talked about her home, about the books she liked to read, about the garden she wanted to plant when the war ended. What happened to her? She volunteered for a sacrifice mission 3 different times. 3 times I watched her walk into certain death to help her squad advance, and 3 times she somehow survived. Krelthak's 3 eyes focused on Vexmira. The 4th time she did not come back. The cantina was very quiet now. Even the background music had stopped. But here is the thing that still gives me nightmares, Krelthak continued. Before her last mission, I asked her why she kept volunteering. She smiled at me and said, because someone has to and I am good at not dying. That makes no sense. That is what I thought too. But then I understood. Yoon Da-hee was not trying to die. She was trying to live long enough to complete impossible missions. She had turned her own survival into a weapon against us. Krelthak gestured toward the empty cantina. Most species see death as failure, the end of the mission. But humans see death as just another tool. If dying helps them win, they will die. If living helps them win, they will live. They do not care which one it is. Vexmira picked up her pad again and started writing. During the final assault on Crimson Mesa, I watched human soldiers do things that broke every rule of warfare I had ever learned. They sent wounded soldiers into our medical areas knowing we would try to help them, but the wounded soldiers carried hidden explosives. They attacked medical stations? No. They waited until our medics were treating them, then they activated the explosives. They killed themselves and our medics at the same time. Krelthak's voice got even quieter. But the worst part was not that they did it. The worst part was that it worked. After 3 such attacks, our medics became afraid to help anyone. Even our own wounded soldiers started dying because the medics were too scared to treat them. That is psychological. Warfare. Yes, but psychological. Warfare taken to a level that no other species had ever imagined. The veteran finished his drink and pushed the glass away. Captain Lee Hyun explained it to me later when I was his prisoner. He said that most species fight to protect their lives. Humans fight to protect their purpose. If their purpose requires their death, then death becomes acceptable. What was their purpose on Crimson Mesa? To break our will to fight. And it worked perfectly. Krelthak looked around the empty cantina. By the end of the battle, coalition soldiers were afraid to advance, afraid to retreat, afraid to help their wounded friends. The humans had turned our own compassion against us. They made our strengths into weaknesses. How did the battle end? We surrendered, Krelthak said simply. 3,000 coalition soldiers surrendered to 800 humans. Not because they had better weapons or more soldiers. Because we could not fight enemies who were willing to use their own lives as ammunition. Vexmira was writing quickly now, trying to capture every word. After Crimson Mesa, word spread through the coalition fleets. Stories about human tactics, human sacrifice, human determination. Soldiers started requesting transfers away from human battle zones. Some deserted entirely. What about you? I stayed. I needed to understand. I needed to know if humans were heroes or monsters or something else entirely. Krelthak leaned back in his chair. By the end of the war, I realized they were all three at the same time, and that was the most terrifying discovery of all. He looked at Vexmira across the table. Do you want to hear about what I learned in the final battles? Because that is when I discovered the real truth about human warfare. Yes, she whispered. Then prepare yourself, because what I tell you next will change how you think about every human you ever meet. The cantina was almost empty now. Only one other table had customers, and they were getting ready to leave. The server had dimmed the lights even more, and the air felt thick with smoke and old stories. Krelthak ordered his last drink of the night. His hands shook slightly as he lifted it to his lips. The final phase of the war was different, he said. By then, the humans had been fighting for almost 4 years. I had been with various human units for 2 of those years, and I started to notice changes in them. Vexmira checked her recording device to make sure it was still working. What kind of changes? Captain Lee Hyun stopped sleeping. I would see him sitting awake all night staring at nothing. Sometimes he would talk to empty chairs like someone was sitting there. When I asked him about it, he said he was talking to his dead soldiers. Krelthak took a sip of his drink. Sergeant Kim Jae developed a habit of counting things: ammunition, medical supplies, even the number of steps between buildings. She would count out loud over and over like she could not stop herself. Were they going crazy? I thought so at first. But then I realized something worse. They were still perfect soldiers. Still deadly, still smart, still effective. The war was changing them inside, but it was not making them weak. It was making them more dangerous. The veteran rubbed his scarred neck. Private Park Soman started collecting things from dead enemy soldiers. Small things. A ring, a picture, a lucky coin. She kept them in a bag and would look at them during quiet moments. When I asked her why, she said she was remembering the cost. The cost? Every enemy they killed, every battle they won, every sacrifice they made. She was keeping track of all of it. Like she was building a debt that would have to be paid someday. Krelthak stared into his drink. But despite these changes, they kept fighting, and they kept winning. The final battle of the war was at the Nexus Gateway. Do you know that place? I have heard of it, Vexmira said. It controls the main trade routes between sectors. Exactly. Whoever held the Nexus Gateway could control half the galaxy's commerce. The Coalition sent everything we had left to defend it. 20,000 soldiers, the best weapons, the strongest fortifications. How many humans attacked it? 2,000. Vexmira looked up from her writing. That is impossible odds. Yes, and the humans knew it. But they attacked anyway. Krelthak's 3 eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. I was part of the defense force. We were confident. Even if the humans were good fighters, 10-to-1 odds meant we could not lose. We had enough ammunition to fight for months. We had enough food for even longer. But something went wrong? Everything went wrong. But not in the way you would expect. The veteran took a long drink. The humans did not try to break through our defenses. Instead, they surrounded us and began what they called a pressure campaign. Small attacks day and night for weeks. They never tried to take the gateway. They just kept attacking, retreating, attacking again. That sounds like harassment, not a real battle. That is what we thought too, but it was much more than harassment. It was psychological warfare on a level we had never experienced. Krelthak leaned forward. Every attack was different. Sometimes they would hit our supply lines. Sometimes they would attack our communication centers. Sometimes they would just make noise all night to keep us from sleeping. We never knew what was coming next. That would be frustrating. Frustrating does not begin to describe it. After 2 weeks, our soldiers were jumping at shadows. After a month, some were refusing to go on patrol. After 6 weeks, we had more soldiers in the medical bay from stress than from actual wounds. Vexmira was writing quickly, but the humans were suffering too. I could see it in their faces when we captured prisoners. They looked tired, hungry, desperate. Some of them had wounds that should have sent them to hospitals, but they kept fighting anyway. Like what? I met a human corporal named Nam Jin Ho during a prisoner exchange. His leg was broken in 3 places. He had tied metal rods to it like a splint and kept walking. When I asked him why he did not go to a medical station, he said his squad needed him more than he needed a doctor. Krelthak shook his head. There was a lieutenant named Ansu Jin who lost her left arm to an explosion. Instead of evacuating, she learned to shoot with her right hand and kept commanding her troops. She said losing an arm was an acceptable trade for valuable experience. How could they keep fighting in such condition? That is what I asked myself every day. And slowly I began to understand the answer. The veteran finished his drink. Humans do not fight the way other species fight. Most beings fight until the cost becomes too high. Then they retreat or surrender. It is logical. It is reasonable. It is what any sane creature would do. But humans are different. Humans fight like the alternative to victory is the complete destruction of everything they care about. Not just their own death, but the death of their entire species, their entire planet, their entire reason for existing. Krelthak's voice got very quiet. During the final week of the siege, I watched human soldiers share their last food with wounded comrades. I watched them give their ammunition to others who had better shots. I watched them carry injured friends for miles through enemy territory. That sounds noble. It was noble, but it was also terrifying, because they did all of this while they were dying, not just from wounds, but from exhaustion, from hunger, from the simple fact that they had been pushing their bodies beyond human limits for months. Vexmira stopped writing and looked at him. How did it end? We surrendered. Not because we had lost militarily. We still had more soldiers, more weapons, more supplies. We surrendered because we could not match their determination. Krelthak touched one of his scars. The human commander who accepted our surrender was Captain Lee Hyun. He had lost weight. His hair had turned gray and his hands shook when he was not holding a weapon. But his eyes were still sharp, still dangerous. What did he say to you? He thanked me for fighting honorably. Then he told me something I will never forget. He said, war is not about who is right or who is wrong. War is about who is willing to pay the highest price, and humans will always pay more than anyone else is willing to pay. The veteran looked around the empty cantina. After the surrender, I watched the human soldiers celebrate their victory. But it was not the kind of celebration you would expect. They were quiet, sad, almost mourning, like they had won something terrible. Why were they sad? Because winning had cost them more than losing would have cost us. They had sacrificed parts of themselves that could never be replaced. And they knew it. Krelthak stood up slowly, his old wounds making him move carefully. That is when I realized the real truth about human warfare. They do not win because they are better fighters. They win because they are willing to become something inhuman in order to protect what makes them human. He looked at Vexmira one last time. Are you ready to hear how that story really ends? The cantina was completely empty now except for Krelthak and Vexmira. The server had gone into the back room, leaving them alone with the dim lights and the weight of unfinished stories. Krelthak stood by their table, looking older than when the night began. The war officially ended 6 months after Nexus Gateway, he said. There was a ceremony on the neutral station where we are sitting right now. Representatives from all the coalition species came to sign the peace treaty. Vexmira turned off her recording device for a moment. Did you attend? Yes, I was chosen to represent the Korthak military. It was supposed to be an honor. Krelthak sat back down heavily. But watching the humans at that ceremony taught me the final lesson about their species. What did you see? I expected them to be celebrating. They had won the greatest war in galactic history. They had defeated an alliance of dozens of species with superior numbers and technology. They should have been proud, happy, triumphant. Krelthak turned his recording device back on, but they were not celebrating. Captain Lee Hyun was there, representing the human military. He looked sick, not from injury, but from something deeper. When he signed the treaty, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely write his name. Was he afraid of something? No. He was carrying the weight of everything he had done to win. Everything his soldiers had done. Everything they had become. The veteran poured the last few drops from his bottle into his glass. After the ceremony, I found him sitting alone in a bar much like this one. He was staring at a picture of his original unit. The soldiers I had fought alongside during my first months with human forces. Were they celebrating somewhere else? Most of them were dead. The words hung in the air like smoke. Of the 50 soldiers in Captain Lee Hyun's original unit, only 7 survived to see the end of the war. Sergeant Kim Jae was not one of them. Private Park So-min was not one of them. Corporal Choi Min was not one of them. Vexamira's hand stopped moving across her notepad. I sat down next to Lee Hyun and asked him how he felt about winning the war. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much death, and he said something that still echoes in my mind. What did he say? He said, "And we did not win this war. We survived it. And surviving is not the same as winning." Krelthak took a small sip of his drink. I asked him what he meant. He put the picture away and ordered another drink. Then he told me the real secret about human warfare, which was, humans do not enjoy fighting. They are not a naturally aggressive species. Everything they do in war goes against their basic nature. Vexmira looked confused, but they were so good at it. That is exactly the point. They are good at war because they hate it so much. Every human soldier I met talked about home, about peace, about the things they wanted to do when the fighting stopped. They did not fight because they loved violence. They fought because they loved everything that violence threatened to destroy. The veteran's 3 eyes focused on something far away. Captain Lee Hyun told me about human children. He said they play games where they pretend the ground is dangerous. The floor is lava, they call it. They have to find ways to move around without touching the ground. It teaches them to think creatively when facing impossible situations. That sounds like fun. Lee Hyun said that is how humans approach every battle. They treat war like the ground is lava, and they have to find a way to survive without touching it. But unlike the children's game, the lava in war is real, and it burns everyone who touches it. Krelthak finished his drink. He told me that every human soldier knows they are becoming something terrible in order to protect something beautiful, and that knowledge eats at them like acid. What happened to the human soldiers after the war? That is the saddest part of this story, Krelthak said. Many of them could not go back to being normal humans. They had changed too much. They had seen too much. They had done too much. The veteran's voice grew even quieter. Sergeant Kim Jae died 2 weeks after Nexus Gateway. Not from enemy fire, but from her own hand. She left a note saying she could not stop counting the dead. Vexmira gasped softly. Private Park So-min lasted 3 months after the war ended. She tried to go home, tried to plant the garden she had talked about. But she spent every night walking the perimeter of her house, checking for enemies that were not there. One morning, her family found her collapsed from exhaustion. She died in a hospital, surrounded by people who loved her but could not understand what she had become. And Captain Lee Hyun? He lived, but he never went back to Earth. He became a wanderer, moving from station to station, planet to planet. Sometimes he would contact other war survivors trying to help them adjust to peace, but mostly he traveled alone. Krelthak looked directly at Vexmira. I met him one more time about a year after the war ended. He was on a freight station near the Outer Rim. He looked like he had aged 10 years and 12 months. What did he say to you?
He asked me to remember his soldiers.
Not as the warriors they became, but as the people they had been before the war. He said that was the only way their sacrifice would have meaning. The veteran stood up again, this time moving toward the cantina's exit. Lee Hyun told me that humans have a saying, war is hell, but he said that was wrong. Hell, he said, is what war does to the people who fight it. Hell is what they carry with them for the rest of their lives. Vexmira gathered her notes and followed him. So what is the real truth about human warfare? She asked. Krelthak stopped at the cantina's door and turned back to her. The real truth is that humans are the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, not because they love war, but because they hate it so much they will destroy themselves to end it. They will become monsters to protect beauty. They will sacrifice their souls to save their species. He pushed the door open, letting in the cool night air of the station. Every other species fights until the cost becomes too high. Humans fight until there is nothing left of themselves to sacrifice, and then they fight a little more. Vexmira stepped outside with him. They saved the galaxy by becoming something the galaxy should fear. And the most terrifying part is that they know it. They carry that knowledge like a wound that will never heal. Krelthak looked up at the stars visible through the station's transparent dome. So when you write your story about human warriors, remember this. They are not heroes because they won. They are heroes because they paid a price that no one should ever have to pay. And they paid it willingly, knowing exactly what it would cost them. The old veteran walked away into the night, leaving Vexmira alone with her notes and the weight of a story that would change how the galaxy thought about humanity forever. In her recording, his final words were barely audible. The humans saved us all. But who will save the humans from what they became to save us? The question echoed in the empty corridors of the station, waiting for an answer that might never come.